Hi, this is Makhonas Bokane, the leader and the founder of Young Men Empowerment Forum. How to identify the leadership or great leadership gene inside of you. Now, as a young man, you need to be able to identify when you've got a gene of leadership in you and start enhancing it and making sure that it works out and you become a better person as you do so. And that is you who's supposed to identify it. But there are ways of identifying. And today, as I deal with part 2, I want to bring about another nugget of how to identify that you are having a gene of being a great leader inside of you. Now, I want to mention today that when you have got a gene of great leadership in you, you'll realize that you'll always want to know the stories of other people. You'll always want to know the story of people. Now, the people that you are mentoring, people that you are talking to, people that you are company that you are in company with, whether it's your colleagues, whether it is your friends and peers, people that you're always around with, you'll realize that you'll always be inquisitive in wanting to know their story. And because when you are going to mentor people and get them to become better, the story behind it becomes very important. Because remember that when you know the stories behind what people are about, it actually helps you to make a better judgment. Because people that are leaders, they are actually great judgment trendsetters, people that are able to make good judgment at all times. They're not biased in their thinking. They're not biased in how they look at things. They are always very sober in how to look at things and therefore become very, very sober in their judgment. And why I'm mentioning that is because you can only become sober in your judgment when you are interested in the story behind. Because it's easier to conclude looking at how somebody behaves and conclude on who they are, what are they doing, and so on, forgetting that there's a story behind. There are those people that behave in a certain way because of the background of their family, because of what the environment where they grew up at, and maybe the culture that they're coming from. And when you know the stories behind, you are able actually to understand why people behave in a certain way. Now, as a leader who's having a gene of leadership in you, you're having a great leadership gene inside of you as a young man, you would actually be interested in knowing the stories of the people. Because as I said, the knowledge of the story of the people will actually help you to make a rational decision and fair judgment in every situation. You're not going to crucify people for things that are not necessary to crucify them for. You're not going to crucify people for things that they are not liable of. Because you would have known the story that this person therefore says this thing is because of they coming from this particular environment. They're coming from this particular background, and that would make them to think this way. That would make them actually maybe to address things this way or to behave this way. And that is why you'll make a fair judgment. Now, wanting to know the story of other people is very important. But also I want to emphasize that people that are great leaders, not only interested in knowing stories of other people, but they know their own story. In other words, they would know their own background. So I want you as a young man to understand that knowing your own story becomes key as well. Because as a leader, then you want to get to know yourself as an individual. You want to know also the other people as individuals as well. So you don't make judgment on collectives. You don't actually judge people on biases and looking at people like in the same frame, like in a group, and this like the biases that normally people have or stereotypes that people have about others. And you've seen it in life where people will say, so all males are like this, or all women are like this. When you start to throw in biased words or approach like that, you are basically not actually doing justice to your leadership gene. Because people that are leaders, they are able to have a fair judgment, not on biases of groups and stereotypes of thinking that because this person is a male, that's why he behaves this way, or this person is a lady, and that is why she behaves this way. That is, as a leader, very flawed. flawed if you're judging people that way. So therefore, knowing your story and background, how you grew up, and knowing yourself better, knowing the people's stories as well, becomes therefore very key in regards to this. And that's the reason why I'm actually bringing it up and say, as a young man, please, if you want to identify the gene in you of leadership, you must, one, know your story, and also be interested in knowing other people's stories. And remember that a person is not simply the way you see them. So in other words, you can't interpret people by one incident or by just seeing them doing something once. So it's going to be very important that as a leader, therefore, you study people, not only study them from far, but sit down with them and know their story. Let them tell their story. Let them talk to you. Let them communicate. Let you start comprehending what they're dealing with. Start comprehending what they are about. So that when you start to understand that, you're going to be able as a leader to make a formal judgment, as I've said, and that will help you to become a really great leader. But this is something that I must emphasize, that for you to identify that you've got a leadership gene in you, is when always you are interested in knowing the people's stories behind the story. So, meaning that whatever happens, you're not actually just making a quick judgment. You're always finding out what has happened before this. Trace it and find out and ask questions and get answers. And therefore, after getting answers, and you start to interpret according to the data that you have, the information that you have, then relate and correlate and therefore open up your mind and be open and don't be judgmental. Don't start judging people quickly about what they're going through. And I want to emphasize that is a gene of leadership. When you want to identify a gene of leadership inside of you, so please make sure that you know your story. Make sure that you know people's stories. Make sure that you dig in people's stories, and make sure that you fill up spaces based on the story that you have, and make sure that you don't judge people on one incident or happening. So you make sure that you relate it to the background, what they're coming from, and what is the story behind it. What are the emotions that are actually going along with what they feel right now? How could they behave this way? What could it be? So all those things, when you analyze that and come up with a conclusion of answer and understand very well, that is showing that you've got a gene of great leadership in you. And please enhance it as well, as I've said earlier. Enhance that great gene of leadership inside you. Become a better leader, therefore, because of that. I want to end up here today. Your host, Mekonas Pokane. Thank you very much for listening to us and be part of this great topic as we deal with part 3 tomorrow. So please join us once more. But I want to emphasize as well that please follow us on our YouTube channel. So please subscribe to it and make sure that also our social media platforms, you are there. Click likes and notification buttons as well to make sure that you are following us through these teachings and these nuggets, and they will help you to become a better person. Thank you very much, and allow me to say join us tomorrow once more as we deal with part 3, and cheers for now.